Loneliness, silence, anxiety. Too many men are carrying it alone. I'm Jack Starr, powerlifter, personal trainer, aerialist, and ex-private investigator, and this is The Other Side of Tough. We're rewriting manhood one conversation at a time, and today we have a special guest, Alexis Luczack, and she is the founder of iFit Athletes. She works with NFL players. She works with Olympians. She's been to 4 Olympics. She probably knows more athletes than most sports agents know. And she has a very inspirational story. She's a survivor. She's a podcaster. She's fitness influencer who's had the honor of working at Westside Barbell with Louis Simmons, the famous Louis Simmons. If you don't know who that is, he's pretty much come up with most of the modern techniques of lifting, including the conjugate method, which is very much used in powerlifting and other sports. So welcome to the show, Alexis.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for the intro.
Of course, of course. And it's funny, when I first met you, or we first started working together, you were as personal training. I remember going to my ex-wife and showing, because I do a little research on all my potential clients, and I showed her your profile, and I'm like, this woman should be training me. She is in amazing, phenomenal shape, and she's doing so much. And so, yeah, it was a real honor to be able to train you, pick your brain. I think I picked up more than you picked up from me. But yeah, it was.
Don't sell yourself short. Don't sell yourself short.
Oh, thank
The
you.
thing about life is that I firmly believe when we are meant to meet people, we meet people. And if you aren't in a relationship where you can learn from each other, then it's not working, right? And that's something that I think we should learn in the beginning of life, but it takes us, for some people, their entire lifetime to understand that. And it's so important because every relationship that you're in is that, right? We're entering in this bond, whether it's training, whether it's treating, whatever it might be, but it's people coming together to learn and to get and to gain from each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And on that note, I gotta say, just with the people I've met through my work, through training, I've been really blessed with some inspirational people, and you're definitely one of them. And you're working right now with NFL athletes. You're traveling.
Yeah.
Tell me about your story, because you're a survivor, and I remember hearing your story when I was training, and it just blew me away with all the things that you've been through. And after, most people going through that sort of thing would break or would choose bitterness. But instead, you chose a profession where you heal people. You went through all these things and you took your experience and you became a healer, which shows that, your integrity and what a good person you are. So if you could walk us through how you came around doing the work that you do now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for me, it started at a young age. I had cancer when I was 6 years old, and I always knew that I was going to be in the medical profession. I just didn't know what it was going to be. And when I was 18, I lost all feeling in the left side of my body. The doctors told me that it was MS. Started treatment for MS, but it was never MS. And I had long-term side effects of chemotherapy. And it was really my husband who was, basically said, Lex, you're the smartest person I know. Like, why can't you heal yourself? And it propelled me into this naturopathic medicine program that forever changed my life, but changed the trajectory of my path in terms of really understanding what my purpose is on this earth and how to use it. And I think that we can look at the things that we go through in our life as pain, or we can look at is that it's a pain serving purpose. And diamonds aren't created unless they're under pressure. And I've been through many experiences in my life that To me, I just think it's more of the refinement. It's more of creating that brilliant, flawless diamond, so to speak. Um, and so having cancer 3 times, um, going through different tragedies. The biggest, obviously, as I shared with you, was losing my husband 4 years ago. That was, I think, the nothing can prepare you for a loss like that, because it's a crater of a void, and it's something that it doesn't. As much as people say, like, oh, it gets better with time. Um, I've not found that to be necessarily true, because to me, his passing is more like a scab. It never scars. So at any point you can bang it, and that scab can come off. And you're dealing with that emotion of that moment, right? And I think it's something that we don't necessarily talk about in the grieving process, because it's a pain that we say, like, oh, with time it heals, it's going to go away. It doesn't go away. You just find ways to manage it better. um, but I think that that's life, right? So all of these experiences have brought me to a place where, um, it's allowed me to be a better provider and a better healer, because I have the ability to really tune in to your frequency, to understand what your body is telling me. Because our words are powerful, but the actual frequency of our being that's a completely different language. And when you understand that and you're on that level, you know how to treat every single injury, ailment, cancer, whatever it might be. You have the ability to be able to find the answers.
I completely agree. And, coming from my own experience, I would say about 8 months ago, I really hit a low point, because I had an injury, both in my lower back and hip, bulging disc, most likely. And it took me out of the sport I loved. I had to cancel out of nationals. And it was a very hard hit for me. And when you have those type of injuries, when you go through the suffering, you don't see the light necessarily at
Yeah.
the tunnel, and it's scary and you feel lost in it. But it's other people who have taken that path that you can see, and you're like, oh, this person went through way worse and is back at it and has recovered. And that's kind of the thing that keeps you going, is like other people that have been through those experiences. And so that's why it's so important when other people suffer, especially in athletics, from these injuries, to provide information to the rest of us. Because instead of like saying, "Oh, I'm going to quit. This is it for me," or "I'm going to go get some life-changing surgery," when I could work it out, by just doing a rehab process and taking time with it. Um,
But I
so.
think that that's the challenge, Jack. I think the problem in the United States is that, for years, and I hate to age myself, but when
Mhm.
when I went to school, we talked about fascia or connective tissue as it was a nuisance material. We used to cut it away in surgery. And fast forward, right? It wasn't until 2005, really 2005 to 2008, where the US even started to understand more so what this fascia was, and that it was the most important system in the body. And I think that we're still stuck at that 1976 standard of treatment, and it's 2025. Our Unfortunately, our modalities haven't they haven't excelled at the rate that they should have, and so we're still back to that. Surgery is the only option for many cases, and it's really not. And the unfortunate part is a lot of people have surgery and end up making their condition worse because there's underlying issues that weren't treated, and
Mhm.
surgery doesn't fix those issues, right? So now we've got this layered problem that surgery didn't make it better; it only made these things worse. And how do we now take apart and unravel all of these pieces, because you thought you were going into something and it was supposed to make you better and it didn't.
and you have to restart the whole process of
Right.
rehabilitation again. And I think another important thing, especially with athletes, and if you could confirm this, is that, you know, the point of injury recovery is to become even stronger. It's not only to recover, it's to strengthen your weaknesses. So it's really important
100%.
that you take that process instead of taking shortcuts or just trying to get around it and just trying to fix it, to actually, you know, take the time to put into the work on it, because it's really all about strengthening it. And that's what I found with my hip and my back, is it's even stronger now, and I'm hitting even heavier lifts and loading up even more weight with it now that I went through that long, tedious process of recovery.
Oftentimes people think that where the area of injury is the area that needs to be focused on, and that's where you spend all of your rehab. The reality is the injury was a compounding factor of something else. So there was already weakening in your overall structure. And if you don't strengthen your system, right? Because it's not just looking at your hips or your back or your glute, everything works together. And so you have to, you know, so often I find that people are like, oh, it's my hips, so I'm going to do a ton of hip thrusts and I'm going to do a ton of hip strengthening exercises. But then, it was their quads and they
Mhm.
weren't doing the work to strengthen their quads. And so now there's another imbalance and there's another area of opportunity to have an injury. So it's not only is it taking the time, but it's understanding how our bodies actually work, how they're connected, how the entire muscular system, right? How it all interacts. Because if you think of it, we're like a big game of Tetris. And if the
Okay.
pieces don't fit perfectly, they don't work properly.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. And I mean, that, like in anything with lifting in general, you know, you're having to coordinate all the muscles in your body. Like a bench press,
Exactly.
it's just the chest, it's
Right.
the legs, it's from the toes all the way up to the shoulders.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that is so important. Um, this, of course, I wanted to get into some of your experience with, you know, professional
Yeah.
athletes and stuff, because this is a male podcast, and I want to talk about the male experience, especially because a lot of men growing up were limited to the role models we have. They're usually just limited to athletes or entertainers. And you work with the most elite athletes in the world, from Olympians to NFL players. Um, do these athletes consider their position as role models to younger people? And if so, how do they deal with that immense pressure?
I would tell you that I think most athletes, most people who are in the spotlight, yes, they see themselves as people of influence. And I don't think that you get to the highest level without understanding that. But
Okay.
I think that there's a difference, because when you understand that you're basically under a microscope and every part of your life is up for criticism, right? Um, you move in a different way for the most part. But I think that it's when there's challenges that arise in their life, whether it's an injury, whether there was trouble off the field. Um, I think that's when they really it takes a different um, it's almost as if it hits them different, right? There's a level of growth in it, because then they really understand, like, wow, I have this 7-year-old boy who looks at me different now because I just got arrested, or because whatever the case may be, right? And I think that for them, it's that wake up moment that they that every part of their life, they're called to a higher being. They're called to a higher purpose. And it's not only did they make it, and it's what they're doing on the field, or, but it's what they're doing off the field. It's the level of impact that they make in the community. And that's the part that I think takes much longer than it should to understand and cultivate.
Excellent. Yeah, and I mean, they're thrust into that position at such a young age. I
Yeah.
can imagine, because like where I was at when I was in my 20s, like I was emotionally immature and I couldn't imagine having that much pressure, that much wealth, that much influence, that much attention. Um, it's just got to be an overwhelming burden, plus with the pressure to perform and to stay healthy. Um, Continuing on with this line, there's been a lot of high profile cases recently, specifically in the NFL, where athletes have gotten into legal trouble due to criminal violence. This includes domestic battery and attempted murder most recently. Do you think this is a microcosm of toxic masculinity in society in general, or do you believe that the violent nature of competitive sports exasperates this type of behavior?
No, I think, listen, violence happens every day in our society, and it's unfortunate. The problem is, again, these athletes are under a microscope. So you're going to hear about this small population of athletes and the trouble that they get into more than our neighbor next door. But do I think that I think we're at a point in our society that we're doing wrong. In that we don't know how to communicate any longer, and we don't know how to actually have emotional intelligence. It's not something that's taught. We've gone away from all of the standards that made you whole, and and now it's so unfortunate. What I see is that two people will be at dinner and they're not even communicating with each other. They're on their phone and they're
Yeah.
texting each other, right? But they don't know how to have that conversation face to face because they don't know how to use their words to tell people how they feel. And I think that unfortunately we're seeing so much of this violence because it's like a volcano. We all
Mhm.
have volcanoes inside of us, right? And if
Yeah.
we know how to use our words to be able to say, hey, like, this is bothering me. I think I shared with you one time in our training session, I had instituted what we called, my husband and I, flags on the play. So we knew, like, if it was a yellow flag, I'm throwing this flag down. It's something that needs to be addressed. It doesn't need to be addressed immediately. We can let the day go on. But at the end of the day, at the end of the play, it needs to be addressed. Now, if
Okay.
it's a red flag that's thrown, right? Like, whoa, okay, we need to review the play. Like, something has happened and it has thrown us off course. And if we don't address it right now, we're not going to be okay.
Okay.
And I think that that's so, for us, it was so important because it made us mature in the emotional intelligence and capabilities of communicating to understand, hey, I'm not okay. Hey, this is bothering me. And I don't think that humans in general, like, I don't think we do that enough any longer. And I think we let things explode. And when we consume our eyes and our ears with nothing but violence, whether it's TV shows, whether it's music, you are only hearing about what people are doing negatively, right? And it's keeping you at a lower frequency. So when something happens in your personal life, what are you going to do? You're going to react to what you know, and what you know is unfortunately in some cases violence.
Do you think it's specifically glorified on these things, or do you think it's just part of human nature? Do you think human nature brings it out on social media in entertainment and that sort of thing, or do you think it's being imposed
I
upon
think
human
we live in such
beings
a
to
negative
dumb us
world
down?
right now. I think we live in such a negative world that social media, well, it should be here to help us and to mature us and to bring out better
Inspire?
qualities in us. I think it's actually doing the opposite because you can hide behind a device and speak whatever you'd like to say,
Mm.
whatever hurtful slur, right?
Yeah.
And there's no ramification. And I can tell you, I see it from these athletes that they might have a bad game. Well,
Yeah.
every one of us is never going to have 365 perfect days, right?
Nope.
But we're not in the spotlight, so you're not going to possibly, you might not see my bad day. But if he has a bad game, you're going to see it. And sometimes it's really hurtful if you allow it to be when you have people who, you know, tell you that you should die because you missed a catch. That to me is insane.
It
It's absolute
absolutely.
insanity that someone would even think that you should write those words because they missed a catch.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I mean, these guys are almost kids, people in their 20s. And,
Exactly.
grown men or even sometimes grown women are, saying these awful things to people. And it shows, I think it shows a decay in them that they put so much importance in something, sports is meaningful because it inspires, right?
Right.
But you shouldn't be so attached to it that you threaten someone. That it should be, at the end of the day, you entertained me, you inspired me, and that's it. And if you didn't perform, you didn't perform. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, next game.
I think that
But
that's the hard part, Jack, is that we live in a society right now where entertainment, whether it's influencers, whether it's athletes, whatever it might be, right? We have somehow associated that they're our friends or that we can communicate with them in a way that we can let them know, well, if I was in your position, this is what I would do, right? Um, and it's unfortunate that again we're not understanding that it is just that, right? It is a version of entertainment. And but it goes back to what we were talking about in that emotional intelligence and what we're lacking, because so many of these of our of humans were unfulfilled, and we don't want to take the time to spend understanding our own being, then you know because that's scary. So instead I'm going to look to the exterior, and the exterior is all the things that I can project onto.
exactly, exactly. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit, and talk about you. What is your experience as a female working in such a masculine space as the NFL, or any kind of athletics like the Olympics? What are the challenges as a woman you face in these spaces, or do you face challenges?
I think that I have always been somebody who has understood my purpose, and that has been my foundation. So I don't lead with my gender, so to speak, right? But I lead with my purpose. And I think when you do that, you're showing up completely different because you're showing up the way that you are called to be. So there is no pride, there is no ego, there is no I'm better, I'm this, I'm that.
Mhm.
I'm I'm here for a purpose. And so for me, that has been something that has always been my firm foundation. And I've never, there are many instances where, you could allow yourself to be in a situation where you're like, oh, they're treating me this way because I am a female, or this is happening because I am a female. But I think that if you allow yourself to stand so firm on the foundation of your purpose, no matter what situation you go into, um, people who are trying to make you look a different way, it only looks foolish on them, because at the end of the day, you go in, you do what you need to do, and you leave without drama, right?
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's not, being, people say to me, which I think is funny, like, wow, you're one of the very few females who've been in this at the highest level of the sport for the longest time. Like, that's unheard of. And I laugh, when people say that, because I'm like, oh, really? Like, I don't even see it. I don't realize that. Um, but to me, it's about getting better each year, and it's about, it's about mastering and perfecting the craft of healing. Um, and as long as God wants me to be in this space, He'll keep me here.
That's a great answer. And I think that's, true with everything. As long as you show your authentic self, if you're not afraid to show your authentic self and be bold and be vulnerable, and vulnerability is not weakness. vulnerability is strength because you're so strong that you can show the deepest part of yourself. And that's something that I always try to say. And I mean, I see that with you, like you are an open book, ever since I met you, you always have been an open book. And I think that's just, made my, vision of you as even a stronger person.
Well, thank
Uh,
you. I appreciate that.
no, it's true. It's absolutely true. So let's get to the bigger general question, because this is about asking the questions about, the crisis in masculinity, the
Yeah.
crisis in manhood. What can be done to create a more positive environment for masculinity in pro sports or in life in general?
I think we need to, there's a saying, you slow down to speed up. And I think we need to slow down. I think we need to go back to really mastering the art of communication and the art of emotional intelligence, and teaching how to communicate and teaching how to regulate emotions and how to express in a way that is meaningful, um, and that there is a level of vulnerability that doesn't make them feel weak, because just to your point, it's not weak to be vulnerable, and it's okay to not be okay. And I think that what we're seeing right now, with all these suicides, right,
Yes, yes.
is
And
that,
men are 4 times more likely
yeah,
to commit suicide.
I mean, I think what the stat is, every 7 seconds, if I'm not mistaken, somebody takes their life, which when you think about that, there are so many people on this earth that are hurting that we don't know because they don't know how to communicate it. And I think, when my husband passed away, I had 5 days to basically bury him and get back to work because it was unfortunately during the season. And um, I would have, people would ask like, well, how are you? Are you? And I wasn't afraid to say, I'm not okay right now. I wasn't
Yeah.
afraid to let tears be rolling as I was treating somebody. And it wasn't about them feeling bad for me, but I had to release. And the only way I could do it was feeling what I was feeling. It didn't, the treatment, they still received the best treatment, but I was not willing to sacrifice my own being,
Mhm.
because I had already done that. And so when my husband passed, it taught me, it was the biggest wake up call that I could have had, in that I matter, and that in the moment when you're not okay, you need to, like, it is what it is. You're not okay. And you
Yeah.
don't need to put the facade on. You don't need to put the mask on. You can
You don't
let
need to hold
people
it in.
see, right? But you can let people see the vulnerability, and that you don't have to be, because I think we all have that masculine and feminine sides of us. And
Mhm.
so many of us run off the masculine side. But I think that when you allow yourself to actually be in that feminine energy a
Yeah.
little bit, um,
The divine feminine.
yeah, you see that there's purpose to it. And if you let yourself, so I think, going back to your question,
Yeah.
it's about understanding the basics, and it's about being okay with what you're not okay with, and letting people understand that. And I
Yeah.
think the more that we can do that, and we can teach 7, 8 year old, right? Because,
Yeah. We have to start early.
yeah, I mean, think about it. If when you're talking about developmental years, by the age of 7, if you don't have the foundation in you, it's really hard from 7 on to be able to hardwire it, to allow yourself to go back, because in moments of crisis, you're going back to the first 7 years of that mentality, right?
Yes.
So I think it's one of those that we have to slow down to speed up. We have to allow the space and create the space. And I'm so proud of the athletes that are opening the doors for, mental awareness, and showing
Yeah.
people that they too are not okay. Um, and I think that that's really important. But I think that we're so late in that process, right? Because it's got to go early on. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think about the middle school, the age of middle school, where this is where bullying really first starts to be aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I, I think the majority of athletes, the reason that they didn't get bullied is because they took what they were good at and they excelled in it, and that became the only thing that they focused on.
Mm.
And so, when you look at that, it's a blessing and a curse, right?
Okay.
Because had we had the ability to understand the foundation, um, we would be using our gifts for the purpose that it was meant to be, and not as a shield to avoid the consequence of, if I don't have this, people are going to say, oh, well, it's because you were poor, it's because of this, it's because of that. So I can sweep all that under the rug by being a better athlete.
Absolutely. And me personally, last year I went through, a period where I had ideations of, ending my life. And it wasn't because I was, a lot of times people are like, oh, you just need to be more happy. You just need to be that. But it wasn't that. It was instead that I felt pushed against the wall. I felt confused and I felt very lost. And I knew I wasn't going to actually go through with it, but the fact that I was thinking about it and I was fantasizing about it, it's like that check engine light in your car and it went off. And it's like, okay, this is a
Yeah.
serious problem and I need to talk to someone. And I go to therapy, and I've been really exploring traumas in my life and rooting down into it and doing the hard work. It doesn't just stop at therapy. Therapy is just, the door opening to all the hard work you've got to do, to like dig this stuff up and go through it. But, being able to talk through it and me taking the steps to go to therapy, a lot of young men don't do that. They just, are told to hold it in. And that's just driving with that check engine light, and your problem's just going to be more and more exasperated as you drive that. It's, if it's a car metaphor we're using, the costs are going to go so high up that you're just going to need to buy a new car at the end of the day anyways, instead of fixing something that maybe could have been fixed a lot earlier and a lot less money or painful.
I completely agree with you. I think that the majority of people on this earth have, at one time or another, thought about ending their life. And not that they would do it, but the thought has crossed most people's mind because the pressure becomes too much. And because we don't know how to express and how to communicate it, we let it build up in our mental state, right? And so our mental and emotional parts of our being become so heavy that our physical body becomes sick. And that's
Yeah.
not something that we talk about, right? So you go to the doctor and the doctor's like, oh, well, it's depression. Oh, well, it's this. Well, why am I depressed? Don't give me a pill. I want to understand why I'm depressed. What does that mean, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes, these emotions, when you really understand the body, every emotion represents a different element in the being, right? So it takes on a physical element. And when you start to put it together, the amount of pain that many people carry, um, it does impact their physical state because that emotional component is so heavy. And until you're able to process and to talk about it and to let it out and to say, like, hey, this is what it is. But I think from a therapy standpoint, I love the therapists who actually make you do the work in
Yeah.
terms of, this is what we need to uncover, right? So it's not just, talk therapy is great, but when you talk about the same thing for 7 years over and over and over and nothing changes, that's the definition of insanity. We need to be better at being able to give people the space to let it out, but then the space to actually do the work. And
Yeah.
it's in doing the work that changes everything. Because if you don't do the work, it's never going to change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great point there, because a lot of people, There's toxic therapists too, right? And I've
Yeah,
seen them in action, and I've seen the people who go to them make no progress because they're such great manipulators that they become best friends with their therapist. And so
absolutely.
tell their therapist, it's like, oh, poor you. Oh,
Yep.
this is done to you. Oh, poor you. And they just encourage it. And in fact, they're encouraging their narcissistic behavior. Whereas a good therapist is like, okay, you don't like this about this person, right? That's something you have to look in you. That's
Correct.
probably something that you see in yourself and that you don't like. And it's that kind of introspective that makes therapy powerful. But I have seen it abused before where it's just, your best friend and you're just talking to it. Well, you might as well just talk to your best friend, you know?
Well, here's the unfortunate part. In any profession,
Mhm.
right? You're gonna have great people and you're gonna have poor people.
Yeah.
Um, and it's our job to be able to decipher who is meant for us.
Hmm.
And you need to be able, again, to put in the work because I might I might hire you as a trainer, right? And this is my goal, but you might want to push me to an extreme that I know I can't do and it's affecting every other aspect of my life. But
Yeah.
I won't say something to you. Instead, I keep showing up and I keep hurting and I keep letting it impact the other areas of my life,
Yeah.
right? So we can say this about every single aspect of life. But again, I think that if we were to change the foundation, it changes all of it because then we have the ability to communicate and to have the awareness and the wisdom to be like, oh, wait a second, this person, like, what, this is not meant for me. And I have to be able to use my words to say, you know what, I appreciate your time, but it's not going to work for me.
Yeah.
And I tell people, I tell my athletes, guys, listen, when a provider is doing something that you don't like or you're questioning it or it's hurting you, right? You need to have the awareness to understand, is this part of my plan? Am I supposed to be feeling this way? Is my tissue supposed to be inflamed for 48 hours after the treatment? Is this supposed to happen? Am I supposed to feel sluggish? If you start asking yourself these questions and the answers are no, well, then you have to put yourself into that authoritative standpoint and say, I choose me.
Mm-hmm. 100%. Um, Now I want to get a little personal now, and you don't, like I said, you don't have to go into it if it's too painful for you to
Yeah.
talk about. But you were talking about your husband, and he sounds like a wonderful man. Every time you've talked to me about him, it's just it sounds like a beautiful man.
He
And
was. Yes.
for this podcast, we're trying to make better men. And what are some positive masculine traits that your husband had that you still think of fondly today and that you think would be good to be spread to other men?
So my husband was a power lifter, and so on the
Yeah.
from the exterior, right, he was the definition of masculinity. He was the full on muscle. The persona that we see when we say power lifter, fully
Yeah.
tattooed, all of the above. But
Mm,
he was a teddy bear. He
mm.
was the most, and I, to be honest with you, I find that most of the powerlifting community is that way, right? Like, what the hardest exterior, but the softest interior.
You know what I
Um,
found is that the strongest people, and I've met some of the strongest people, including yourself, are the kindest people and the most
thank
gentle
you.
people.
Yeah. So I think that that was the first the best quality was that he was so caring, and it wasn't just caring about me, it was how he cared about everybody. And how in the we were from Buffalo, and so storms would happen and he would be out on the streets helping people out of ditches and whatever he would needed to do. And he never wanted credit for it. It was never like he would go and be like, "Do you know what I did?" But it was in that it was just the presence of who he was in his kindness, and how he cared, that I think to this day, like, that's what I miss the most, because it's so rare to find that in people.
That's beautiful. That really is. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Thanks
And
for asking. That was, I love when I'm able to have the ability to talk about him, and to talk about, just the beautiful person that he was, and to allow that energy to continue to live on.
yeah, it really is how you eternalize someone,
Yeah.
especially someone you love, because it's important for other men to hear too about
Yeah.
how much of an effect just a man's actions in being caring and being empathetic can have on another soul for the rest of their life.
Absolutely.
So that's very beautiful. And like my heart goes out to you for losing such a beautiful soul.
Thank
Um,
you.
Going to you, I always have in my podcast, I always say one thing I appreciate about the guests that I have on. And one thing that I really appreciate about you is that everything that you've went through, all the suffering that you've gone through, you've turned it into healing, and you heal other people. You've taken all that bad that's happened to you in the world, and instead of saying, why me, which I see a lot of weaker, lower vibrational people do, you've, risen even above higher than that. And you have gone out and you not only said, you know what, I'm not going to let it affect me. You said, I'm going to go out and make a change in the world. I'm going to help heal people. And for that, I really appreciate you, and I really applaud you for being such a strong, because that's the definition of strength, is to being able to suffer and to not only survive it, but to come out even better and help others be better.
Well, I appreciate your words. I'm so grateful that you see that, because for me, I'm so grateful and appreciative that people see who I really am, what my purpose is, and that in all of the pain, we can still have purpose, we can still have pleasure, and we can still find the meaning of life. And that's the most important thing. Um, and I truly am so grateful that that is something that you see, and that's what people see in me, because I want to be that person that shows up that way, because we all have a story and we all have pain. Um, but if we were to change that frequency and live from the highest state, we would change our entire world, really. And I think that that's the biggest thing for me. Um, is that through this process, I saw that 4% of people ever get to the level or the frequency of love. And to me, that's such a small percentage of the population, that
Yeah.
I thought, from this moment on, I'm never going to fall below. Meaning that even when I'm in anger, I'm going to come into anger from love.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, of course, it's really hard because you're training yourself to do these things. But I will tell you, in the last 4 years, it has been such a beautiful journey to really to change every aspect, because it's being aware enough and having the accountability to not let yourself fall below that line.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah. Um, and that's wonderfully well put. And I believe everything that you say, and you do, you do show those traits. You do give back. um, so finally, I wanted to see what you're up to next. Do you have any plans? Do you have any goals? Do you have any projects coming up that are going to be happening?
Oh man, well, right now I'm in what I call survival mode of the season. We have reached we're past the halfway point.
Yeah.
And this has been a grueling season. It's been a fun season, but
Lots of
it's
injuries. I've been watching.
lots of injuries, but a lot of different challenges. Um, last week I had an experience as I was done treating. You always show up because it's an injury, but
Mm,
then sometimes you don't realize that you're really there for the mental and emotional component. And so it was when I was done treating that, this athlete just opened up, and you could tell how much pain he was in,
mhm.
and the amount of suffering that was going on, and what really the game meant to him and his family. Um, and in those moments, I think to myself, okay, well, I'm here for treatment, right? This is so much larger than healing ailments. And it's really healing, it's healing beings. And so I think that the more the more I understand that, I feel that there's probably, everybody keeps saying it's time to write the book. So
Yeah. Go for it. Yes.
so I'm sure that will there will be things I'll explore in the off season in terms of what I'll do. But the off season for me, as you know, I get so excited because that's when I get to take care of me. In terms of refueling myself. So that's where training takes on a completely different, it's the more intense training for myself, because during this season, with the 300 pounds of equipment that I carry around and all of these different things and 3 hours of sleep and one meal a day.
And traveling. You are
it-
in, you told me this, and this is crazy, that you're in the air 3 times more than you are on the ground.
yeah, yeah.
That's insane.
I just got my email from Marriott that said congratulations on your, I don't know, I think it was 322 days of hotel stays. And I just thought to myself, that's sickening. Like,
That's insane. Yeah.
that's so bad. Um, so the off season, I always look forward to, because that's a time to really, spend building myself, and allowing myself to continue the process. And wherever I'm such a firm believer in that, God has ordained my steps and He knows my purpose, and if I just understand what my calling is and stay in that lane, whatever is meant to unfold will. And so that's really how I live my life. So whatever's next it will be a beautiful testament to what I'm meant to do.
It's in God's hands. I love that.
Yeah.
Speaking of blessings, I this is my 5th episode so far, and I've had the blessing.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And why I'm doing this podcast is, because of what I went through in my crisis of masculinity and trying to help other men communicate that. But one thing that I'm blessed with is just finding, by taking on these guests and having guests within my circle that are friends, is
Yeah.
how blessed I am with the inspirational and amazing people that are in my life, including yourself. And it really gives me a great pool to pull, great conversations and information, and people watching this can be inspired and learn. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate that. And with that, we'll wrap it up. That's it for today's episode on the other side of tough. I'm Jack Starr, reminding you that strength is found on the other side. Catch you on the next episode, and thank you so much, Alexis. And I'm sending you blessings and good fortune for everything you got going on.
Thanks for having me, Jack. I appreciate it.
All right, have a good one. Be safe.
Bye.
Bye.